request Mr. Anand Agarwal, co-founder and CTO, Credgenics, to kindly present on visualizing future-ready collections. Please, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your presence today evening. I'm Anand Agarwal, co-founder and CTO of Credgenics. I would like to talk about what's next. What's next for the lenders? What's next for the digital lending? We have been since morning talking about one particular topic which has been consistently coming on and off. It's about collections. And one of the hottest buzz in the market is about digital collections. How can we collect better from the customers? Everybody is trying to focus on that. So since morning, I guess that these consistent talks has been making us realize that the focus being shifted to that. What are the best practices? What are the best ways we can be able to collect better from customers? What are best practices an NBFC or a bank or any financial institutions can follow with respect to collections? Just switching on to the next slide, which is how big this problem is, how big the debt in the country is like how massive the problem is. On the left side, you see the size of the NPA and the loan portfolios, retail loan portfolios, which are in the collection bracket. On the right side are the newspaper cutouts, which says that the NPA is increasing, the COVID stress banks, see how much increase has happened. COVID times, a lot of these numbers were being printed and posted across different news and newspapers. The retail loan book NPAs in India today stands about $35–40 billion, and the total amount of loan or total amount which is there in the collection bucket, which is DPD, is greater than zero, which means at the first instance of default is roughly about $180 billion, which is very, very big number in India. And this takes us all our attention that, hey, we need to solve the collections problem. This number keeps on growing as the lending grows. We cannot kind of just ignore this number, and hence our collection practices needs to be improved. Now coming on to, when we talk about collections, it's not an easy problem. It's a tough problem. It's a complex problem. How do we think about it? How do we solve that particular problem? So what is collections, and how do you kind of describe collections? Collection itself, when you talk about it, it's completely like an unstructured. It's people kind of fear of that. It's unpredictable. Many of these activities, you don't know what the outcome at the end of the month would be. There's a lot of these collection activities lenders do, but what the outcomes would be, it's not easy to realize that. Finally, there is a lot of correlation between the NPAs or the bad debt and the macroeconomics which happens. You would have seen during the COVID days, the numbers of the bad debt or the NPA accounts shot up very, very fast. How do you solve these different problems? Technology brings structure to the problem statement. So technology is one tool, one aspect which can help which can sort out the collections problem and try bringing some structure in the entire ecosystem. This is how the collections could be kind of solved. The second is machine learning, which brings predictability. For example, there is identification of which borrowers have the intent to pay or willingness to pay. So that's particularly the tool which you use to bring predictability in the system, and hence you say this tool is something which can solve collections. Digitization and use of tech or technology make collections very agile and bring many different teams. For example, there is like a feet on street team, there is on ground, there is like calling team, there is communication teams. All of that work together to kind of achieve one objective, which is to get money back in the system. But they work on different software, they are different teams, but do not talk to each other. They are not able to kind of give out the information which they have learned about a borrower to the rest of the team to make better informative decisions. And hence, it's something which can be solved when you bring all of those use cases, all of those teams together to function like a one consolidated team to achieve one objective, which is, hey, we need to collect back. The objective is how can we get the money back in our system. So that's where the complexity of this particular problem. Even to talk about, there is a lot of activities which happen in different brackets. For example, there is a pre-due bucket where many different nudges are created to the borrowers by sending SMS, email, WhatsApp. They do kind of send these nudges so that the customer do keep their appropriate amount of funds in their account. So that could be kind of deducted on the day of due date. Then there is the bucket X, which generally is between DPD 7 to 30 or DPD 0 to 30, which, in which, again, the customer has missed out on the payment, the due date has passed. Some customer would be willing to pay, they would have just forgotten about the loan and they want to make the payment. It's just a nudge which needs to be kind of sent to that particular borrower. There needs to be communication sent to that borrower. If that doesn't work out, a lot of phone calls gets made where a person or agent makes a phone call to that borrower to collect that money back from them. Now see on the third column, if you see, these are the teams which is getting involved. First is like digital team, then there is digital and telecalling team. If you see the third bracket, there is FOS, telecalling and digital team. So these are different teams when you talk about collections. These respective teams are working kind of separately to get the money back. But again, none of them are passing this information to each other that, hey, I've learned this information about the borrower. The borrower has created a PTP that I'll pay back on this particular date, but still we keep on sending the SMS, we keep on sending the communication, which hampers the customer experience, which hampers a lot of the process where you could have collected the money back from that borrower in an effective way. Rather, you keep on doing that because the lack of information is there, which the other team has learned about that borrower. Now, why are collection and their digitization crucial? I mean, obviously, everybody would understand that collection itself is very important, but why is it so? I think in many of these meetings and in events, we heard about like lending is a collections business. It's not something which is where you talk about lending, there are a lot of risk underwriting, you talk about how to give out loan, digital lending process, but you also talk about collections. And collections is the most important aspect of this entire lending process. So we want to kind of understand more about how can we improve collections here. So digitization is one thing which is going to kind of automate some of these processes where manual intervention could be removed. And we would want to kind of achieve the numbers on the collections which are the best of the class. That can only happen, and that can only happen when you are trying to kind of do a lot of systematic way of doing that collections, when these teams come together and function together. Now coming on to, I guess, behavioral collections. Now this is one topic which is very close to Credgenics product. When Credgenics kind of tries to send a communication or even figures out what strategies would work on a particular borrower, this is the flow chart in which it functions. So the first, where we try to kind of identify a borrower or identify a strategy for the borrower which is going to work out for him. There is like, for example, which communication is going to be sent, which creates that effect or the psychological effect in that borrower's mind. Yeah, I need to make the payment back to the lender, or maybe some channel in which he is more interactive. How do we identify that? Let's assume you identify that and you say, okay, this is the initial collection stage, initial collection strategy, and then you try executing that. There is two possibilities of things which can happen. One is in red, one is in green. One of the possibilities which can happen is that the borrower responds to that particular strategy. He kind of clicks on the link of the payment link shared in the SMS. He kind of interacts with that particular communication or the call which you have made to that borrower. The second is the borrower does not even respond to that, and the communication or the nudge which you created gets completely missed out. Now, in the first instance, when the borrower interacts and he kind of clicks on that particular communication, maybe he didn't make the payment. First of all, I mean, he makes the payment well and good. I mean, the job is done. If he doesn't make the payment, you know that the activity which the borrower did gives you a confidence now, here I have at least got the borrower's attention. I have got the borrower's mind there. You have clicked this particular SMS. You understand that you have missed out on a payment and you need to make that payment. So what's the next strategy? You try to identify the next strategy basis whatever the response was on the first strategy, and keep on, again, execute that and keep that loop on. So maybe the second didn't work, we try what's the third strategy and keep on doing that. If the borrower does not respond, then we retry the same communication. Maybe the timing was wrong, maybe something which I was off in maybe mentioning that, hey, the payment link got missed in the communication which we sent, and we retry with a better approach that, hey, the timing is at a leisure time when the customer would have been seeing his phone, and then he interacts with that communication. Even if that fails, we try kind of, what's the next best strategy in my identified set of strategies which would have worked for this particular borrower, and then execute that. And this will keep on going. So this entire flow diagram tells if I'm able to kind of do any of the, kind of identify any of these strategies which will work out for a borrower, I can keep on going in a loop until the recovery is made from that particular borrower, keeping in mind where does the borrower belong to, which DPD bracket does the borrower belong to, and based on that particular DPD bracket, we can make the appropriate strategies. Now you would say, okay, how to identify the initial collection strategy for a borrower? What if, there was first bracket which says you need to identify the initial strategy or the first strategy which makes a nudge to that particular borrower. There is different ways to identify that. One of the ways is by segmenting the borrowers, by kind of creating categories of borrowers. One of the categories, for example, could be self-cure. The borrower does not require any manual intervention, does not require any human or a person to kind of make a call. He once receives a WhatsApp, once receives maybe a SMS, he would go on to click that particular communication and make that payment. The second category could have been, hey, this is a customer which is not going to be easy, or maybe he's not willing to pay. In that particular case, you would straight away jump on to making a manual call, or maybe sending a feet on street person or a field guy, hey, you need to get a collection in cash. I mean, that could be a strategy taken there, because the intent to pay is on a very lower side here. The second strategy here is identifying the intent to pay. Now, how does intent to pay help you? Intent to pay helps you in terms of ranking the customer. So if, let's say I have 1 lakh customers and I need to make the calls, I can in the best possible time want to make the calls to the borrowers where the intent to pay is highest, where the probability of receiving the money back from that borrower is highest. I go on to make the calls to those borrowers. So what's the predictability outcome of that intent to pay for each one of those borrowers, sorted by the maximum probability, the intent being the maximum. I go on to kind of collect the money from them first, and then maybe concentrate on the lower brackets later on. Because wherever the customer's intent is highest, my objective is to maximize the outcome from them in the shortest amount of time. So I try to use this particular strategy for doing that. Now the third is to identify the effective channel and the time to collect. Basically, there is a lot of communications also which customers make, lenders make. For example, maybe they are sending WhatsApp, they are sending SMS, they want to send a voice bot or a WhatsApp bot. So many different channels are there. Do you want to kind of send all of them? Then you're kind of spamming the customer. The customer, even if had an intention to make the payment, might get irritated because of the approach which you take, which you are trying to send all the communication to that. Because of the spam which you made, maybe kind of not wanting to make the payment now. So identification of the most effective channel is important. This particular channel maybe works out best for a particular customer. Maybe that same channel may not work out for some other customer. For example, rural versus urban. In urban set of customers, WhatsApp may work out very well. Someone who is very busy may not receive a voice bot. Most of the times when you kind of send a voice bot to them, may not be able to pick it up, or purposely doesn't pick it up and disconnects that. But a WhatsApp, they definitely check, and they have a habit of clearing of their WhatsApp at the end of the day. So somehow you're trying to kind of identify which channel works out best, what time to send that communication gets, that understanding gets built over a period of time. When you have sent like maybe in the afternoon, in the evening, in the morning, and then you try understanding the customer response maximum times when the messages are sent in the morning, you try to get that information back from that particular borrower. Now, let's assume there is some customers where we don't have much information, which is the dynamic information. I haven't sent any communication. I haven't kind of even interacted with the customers even once. No calls has been made to that customer. Now, how do you identify the initial strategy also, or the first nudge which you want to create to that borrower? In identifying the first strategy, or maybe identifying which channel would be most appropriate for such borrowers, the similar persona concept works, where you try to identify certain borrowers who have the same set of persona or demographics, which is age, gender, maybe geographical location, the salary, or maybe something which is very near about that particular customer. Every person do have like maybe from a feature perspective an identical person in the pool, and that person's payment history or over period of time, the behavior to pay would be resonating for the rest of the borrowers. So that's where we use the information to say, okay, the behavior of this borrower would be very identical and similar to the personas, which is, in terms of the features, very identical. Now coming to what generally is the set of problems in the lending space, which with respect to collections is faced. One of the problems is that there is a lot of vendors which the NBFCs and the banks interact with. I heard ICICI interacts with about 250 vendors. I heard maybe SDFC interact with 100 plus vendors. Now that's not an easy job to do. You have a like whole set of team just doing the procurement and doing the interaction with these lenders, where you're trying to kind of just put a structure, but this is all of that happening on a manual process. Now, these different teams, which does different objectives of maybe doing the calling, feet on street, or communications, use different platforms for doing the collections. For example, for SMS, you would be using some API gateway of SMS or some platform of SMS. For doing a calling, you would be using a dialer system. Now, given all of the data which is being generated on those respective systems, are not married together, are not kind of coming together, you don't get the best outcome from that particular set of events against a borrower. So let's assume a borrower has been called 3 times and has been sent an SMS, email, or a WhatsApp as well. You would have learned a lot more about a borrower if you combine this information than maybe if you just think about like, okay, these 3 calls were made to a borrower, or maybe these communication was sent to a particular borrower. So we try to kind of say, okay, the solution to this particular problem is that bringing all of the collection activities or the platform needed to run all of these collection activities could come together on one single platform, and that will solve a lot of problems, including the regulatory compliance, the data production, and the access control, who in the organization would have what access, what they can be able to execute. The entire hierarchy of the collections team could be maintained and could be managed on one single platform. Easy audits, reduction in collection frauds, efficiencies. There's n number of benefits which you get the moment you try combining all of these different platforms put together. The second problem which is faced is heavy reliance on human operations, leading to high cost and poor customer experience. Now there is, again, in today's time also, we talk about digitalization, we talk about everything we want to do digital, but still you and we know many of those processes are still run manually, many of those nudges are still created where a person maybe when he comes to the office, makes a call to the borrower and he interacts and puts a disposition himself. Now that's like a manual intervention in the entire process of collections, and all of these being manually run are very slow, will not kind of give you the best results. You don't know the best time when to interact with. You cannot interact for scale. For example, if you have 1 lakh accounts but only 100 agents, you would have to wait until that particular borrower's number come in the queue, and then only you will be able to place a call or make a call to that particular borrower. So how do you solve this? You solve this by using scalable channels, for example, chatbots, voice bots, which are maybe taking in disposition from the borrowers as well, that, hey, we want to kind of make the payment, someone should call me back. Now you have made the entire process like a lead generation, where from the 1 lakh customers, you are trying to identify these are the customers whom we should interact first because they are ready to pay. There are certain doubts, there are certain problems which they are facing which can be resolved. So that's how you are trying to kind of prioritize these set of accounts and then maybe deprioritize the other ones. And then that's the best use of these new set of channels. Now, again, this is more with respect to the previous flow diagram which I explained, where there were different strategies being used for different set of collections against different borrowers. Today also, many of these activities which are run for collections are like send SMS to all of these borrowers in one go, maybe sending of WhatsApp messages in a generic manner to all of these borrowers. There is no personalization, there is no customizations which are done, or maybe identification of what channel works for what particular type of borrower. And that's one problem where you are trying to inflate the cost, where the costs of collections are much higher, which can be reduced by using better technologies, which can be reduced by advanced machine learning technologies in today's time. I think if you talk about like how do you transform the today's debt collection, this is more of a summary to what we have discussed. Okay, first is end-to-end digitization. The second is basically a single platform running all your collection activities. The second is use of data science and behavioral collections to identify which strategies works for what kind of borrowers. Different borrowers may be kind of nudged with different set of channels, not necessarily a plain vanilla solution works for all. The third is use an integrated end-to-end collections system. Different collection teams could be brought together on one single platform and they could be kind of working together. And the last is making the entire collections process, which is data driven and customer centric, keeping in mind the customer experience as well. You try to kind of do those nudges, you try to kind of do these collections activities. We are CredGenix. We founded this company back in 2019, just to introduce in brief about ourselves. 2019, when we started, we currently work with about 70 plus lenders. We have 300 team members. We have handled about like 2.2 CR or 2.2 crore accounts on our platform where various collection activities have been run. There's a long list of features which we have kind of released in the last 2 years, which enables you to run all of these collection activities on one single platform. There's about 50 million plus monthly digital nudges which gets triggered from our platform. This is done by all the likes of ICICI, SDFC, IDFC, all of these larger set of banks and NBFCs which uses our platform to run these communications, run these calling activities, and maybe feet on street on our platform. We are funded by the investors, Excel Partners, and Westbridge Capital, one of the good names in the market. So yeah, thank you. I think that's all from my side.
Thank you, sir. May I request Dr. Ravi Gupta, founder and CEO, Elets Technomedia, and editor-in-chief, the Banking and Finance Post, to kindly climb up the stage and felicitate Mr. Anand Agarwal, co-founder and CTO, CredGenix. Please, sir. Can we all give a huge round of applause, everybody?